Standing in court today looking stoic, showing no emotion at all. This is the dad who police say killed his own daughter as they were wrapping up a vacation in New York. WRGB with the video of Luciano Frattolin. This is the man who allegedly killed his 9-year-old daughter in the woods of upstate New York, then left her body by a shallow pond. He then allegedly claimed to police that she had been abducted. That triggered an Amber Alert. Frattolin also reportedly in his first court appearance said he was too broke to hire a lawyer, but just wait until you hear how much money prosecutors say he has in a bank account. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. We learned a couple new pieces of information today in the case of Luciano Frattolin. It is one that is frankly just so horrific, it's hard to comprehend. And we are learning some new, very disturbing details about the death of his 9-year-old daughter, Melina. Let's get to this new video of Luciano Frattolin. Here he is standing by his attorney in a suit in Essex County, New York today. A judge ruled that he's going to be held without bond. Frattolin didn't show much emotion in the roughly 10-minute court appearance as prosecutors explained why they believe that he shouldn't be granted bail. This is video per Albany TV station WRGB. There seems to be a major disagreement over how much money Frattolin has. You might remember this video from WNYT of Frattolin being brought to his first court appearance on July 21st. Before I get to that part of the story, it's important to remind you just how awful and heartbreaking the crime is that this man is accused of committing. Weeks later, I'm still struggling with it. It was on July 19th that New York State Police say that Frattolin made a 911 call from the side of the road in upstate New York near Lake George.
So the suspect's initial account is that he had pulled over in the area of exit 22 in Lake George, pulled over into a parking lot to urinate. His initial report is he steps away to a wooded area, returns to the vehicle, and at that point, his child is gone from the vehicle. He reports a suspicious white van fleeing the scene southbound. During a subsequent interview, he then reports 2 unknown males forced her into a white van.
And this is Frattolin's daughter. Her name was Melina. She was just 9 years old. She lived in Montreal, Canada, and she and her dad were on their way back to Quebec after they spent 10 days on vacation, just the two of them in the United States. They went to New York, the city, they went to Connecticut. This was a father-daughter trip. Frattolin called Melina the light of his life on the website for the organic coffee company that he reportedly founded. He also said she was the inspiration for everything just over 3 months ago. This is Melina at her 9th birthday party in a video that was posted by her dad. And here's a picture from that 9th birthday party of Frattolin giving Melina a big hug and a kiss on the head. And here they are sledding on a hill during the winter in Montreal. I mean, all of this gives you such an impression that Luciano Frattolin was a loving father, and frankly, he was a protective father. But from what he's accused of, that allegedly was not the case. On the 19th, after Frattolin called 911 claiming an abduction, police did trigger an Amber Alert, but it seems very quickly they found out that the story he was telling allegedly of that white van wasn't true. The next day, police say they found Melina's body an hour north of where that 911 call was made. Her body was found in a shallow pond. Then an autopsy was conducted and it showed that her cause of death was suffocation by drowning. And today we learned in a new indictment from the New York Post that Melina's body was pinned under a downed tree and a rock. Police say the last time Melina was seen alive was around 5:30 the night of her death in Saratoga Springs, New York. The two had been at a restaurant. Then they say at 6:30, Melina was on the phone with her mom in Montreal telling her that they were on their way back from their vacation. And at this point, police say everything seemed to be okay. I recently spoke to a woman who says that she saw Luciano on the side of the road that night around 7:30.
And when we locked eyes, I'm never going to forget his face. Never. When I saw him walk out of that courthouse, someone sent me a video and I said, oh my God, that is freaking him. Like, that is him. I will never forget his face. It was like a fear, but like a cold, angry look is all I can describe it as.
Police have not yet said what Frattolin's alleged motive may be to allegedly kill his own daughter at the end of their vacation, a girl who he appeared to worship. On the website for his organic coffee company, he does hint a bit at some trouble. It's the same website where he called Melina the light of his life, but he also said that he went through some hard times in 2019. And that is the same year that he became estranged from his wife, according to New York State Police.
They were expected to return to Canada on Sunday, July 20th, at which time Melina would be returned to the custody of her mother in Montreal. The mother and Mr. Frattolin had been estranged since 2019. The child resided full-time with her mother, and Frattolin visited with the child when in Canada.
The Montreal Gazette spoke with a former friend of Frattolin who didn't give their name, but they said that Frattolin is a dual citizen of Italy and Ethiopia, and he only visited Canada for his daughter and, quote, didn't like the idea of being tied down. Now, that former friend also said their relationship went south after money disappeared from a land deal that Frattolin and his family had in Ethiopia. Not only did Frattolin publicly appear to be a loving dad, he did appear to be a man with a lot of money. His social media shows him living a lavish lifestyle. This is video from just 2 months ago on Instagram. You can see him touring a garage that is full of luxury cars. But then at his first court appearance, he reportedly said he was too broke to hire a lawyer. Today's state prosecutors countered that narrative. Here's what they said per WRGB.
It's the people's opinion. He has, I guess, made it known he had a bid in on a $5 million property in Montreal at this time. He has shown that realtor, I guess, a $30 million bank account. He is, at least according to us, planned on attempting to sell a mining company that would also be worth a significant amount of money. So if you do set an amount, I would ask that it be very high, Judge.
La Presse is a French-Canadian newspaper also covering this story, and it reports that Frattolin was in mounting debt. They say he was being sued by a bank for roughly $110,000. That was related to unpaid credit card debt. And the paper says that Frattolin operated a bed and breakfast in Montreal and used that money to pay for child support. He reportedly has since sold the property, but is tens of thousands of dollars in debt, including for $26,000 in rent that hasn't been paid. Today, prosecutors argued that Frattolin should not be granted bail because he has no connection to the United States. He's a dual citizen of Ethiopia and Italy, and he also has residences in Canada and Ethiopia. Frattolin's lawyer said that he would turn over his Italian passport if he was granted bail, and he would stay with a friend in New York City. His lawyer also said he has, quote, no financial support in the United States, which is an interesting choice of words considering the discrepancy it appears over how much money he actually has. The judge decided that Frattolin would not be granted bail and ordered him to be held in jail as this case continues. He has pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder. We're also learning that Frattolin could face additional charges in Canada for animal abuse. WNYT says before entering the U.S. with his daughter for that 10-day vacation, Frattolin allegedly left his dog at his Montreal apartment without water or food. He will next be in court for a discovery hearing on August 19th. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this case is former prosecutor and current criminal defense attorney Serena Townsen. Thank you, as always, for joining us on Law and Crime. This story in particular, I've really struggled with, just with how the narrative that law enforcement has put out. Looking at this court appearance today, there seems to just be this discrepancy over how much money Luciano Frattolin actually has. What do you make of the arguments we're hearing from the prosecutors, but also his defense?
Well, a big decision for the judge to make is whether to hold somebody, with bail, hold them on remand, meaning they can't buy their way out of jail, or to release them. In a case like this, it's not surprising that a judge is going to probably land on remand. But one of the things that prosecutors are going to want to explain is whether he has resources either here in the States or elsewhere, and whether that's going to affect whether he stays and appears again at trial or at other hearings in court, or if he flees. And so all of this discussion about what money he has access to relates to his, the reliability of him showing up to court again, which directly relates to whether he's going to be held on bail or remanded.
In his first court appearance, he said he was too broke to hire, well, he was just broke. He couldn't hire a lawyer. And then you see the social media and it's this fancy lifestyle. And what stood out to me today was I was just having watched this story thinking that the debt was so bad that he really was broke, but it doesn't appear that way according to state prosecutors. But a lot of his money seems to be either in Ethiopia where he lives, he's an Italian citizen as well, and also spends time in Canada. If he doesn't have money in US bank accounts, how does that work out as far as figuring out whether he can afford a lawyer or whether he gets a public defender?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this has to do with his access to liquidity and access to these funds, right? Like he might have money, but he can't access it and he can't pay an attorney, then, he's going to have to go with a public defender. And it's an interesting thing. And it's not a knock on public defenders, but a lot of times people who are wealthy do hire and retain attorneys. And so it's an interesting thing to assess because does he gain access to that money? Will he be able to gain access to that money? Does he want to? Because if I were him, I would probably want to, gain access to that money just so that he could select his own attorney. Again, not knocking public defenders, but a lot of times people want to select the attorney that represents them for various reasons. So it is strange to me, if he wouldn't want to access that money to be able to hire a counsel that he gets to choose.
As you know, as a lawyer, you're very good with words. I thought it was interesting. His defense attorney said he had no access to financial support in the United States, which when we're just trying to figure out what does a bank account look like for this guy, what stands out to you with that choice of words?
I think the defense attorney is trying to explain to the judge that he actually does need public defender's services because if he did have access to those funds, he would actually not be allowed to use a public defender. You would be disqualified from using somebody for free, and you would be forced to retain someone. So I think on his behalf, she's making this argument that it may look like he's disqualified from this program. It may appear that he should have to use his money for a lawyer, but he simply doesn't have access to those funds at this time. And therefore, he is in need of a public defense.
There's so much that we don't know in this story. What happened? He makes this claim apparently about the Amber Alert and his daughter being abducted, but police found that story wasn't credible very quickly, and we don't know what statements he made at that time. But if you're a prosecutor, how are you building your case? I mean, for as difficult a story as this is, building your case against Luciano Frattolin.
Aside from the evidence that they've been able to uncover, not only the evidence, unfortunately, of this poor girl's death and the manner in which she died, through an autopsy, of course, is additional evidence, but also the concealment aspect. The fact that he made this fake Amber Alert, the fact that he is lying, it goes towards what we prosecutors like to say, a consciousness of guilt. His actions after the fact go towards his mindset. And part of what you need to do to prove guilt as a prosecutor is to show a jury that not only did this happen, but that it wasn't an accident, that he had the required mens rea, which is the required mindset to commit this crime, and that he did so with those intentions. In order to prove murder in the second degree, they have to prove that he did so with the intent to kill her.
When it comes to motive, at this point, there's no official motive that's been put out, but people have been, piecing together a bit of what this man's life looked like. He was estranged from his wife. His daughter lived full-time with her in Montreal. He's kind of jet-setting around everywhere, it seems. One friend said he didn't want to be tied down, which is wild to think when we're talking about like a murder case. That's something that, someone maybe in their mind, we don't know. But then also he had these financial issues and the debt. How much does it, when it comes to getting a conviction as a prosecutor, where do those factors come in, and do they matter at all when it comes to, if you have the forensic evidence that he did it?
It all boils down to probative value versus prejudicial value. So a prosecutor is going to explain to a judge, listen, judge, obviously we're going to talk about the evidence in this case. We're going to talk about the investigation. We're going to talk about, crime scene photos, autopsy results, statements made, all of those things that directly are involved in the case. But all of these other ancillary things that you just discussed, all of the things about, maybe he's posted things on social media that go to his motive are also relevant. And as a prosecutor, it's very important to be able to make a strong argument to a judge that says, judge, this isn't about, making him just look like a bad guy, or what we like to call propensity evidence, meaning he did other bad things in the past, therefore he must be guilty here. As a prosecutor, you want to make that argument to a judge where you're saying, saying it's not just that we're trying to make him look like a bad guy, it's proving motive. There are certain things that you're allowed to do to bring in these other factors, these ancillary factors that may not seem relevant but are, but only if a judge is convinced that those elements are more probative, meaning they're important to prove his motive or other things versus just plain prejudicial.
When it came to the arguments today in this, and it was only about, I think, 7 minutes and 30 seconds was the hearing today, but they covered a good amount of ground. And you have prosecutors saying he actually has a lot of money and he has, no ties to the United States, but more Ethiopia, Italy, Canada. And then you had the defense saying, well, he'll stay with a friend in New York City and he can turn over his passport. When you're in that situation, because I know you're now a criminal defense attorney, how confident are you going in, especially in a murder case, that you might be able to get a client out? Because it seemed like that was a reach just in my opinion, for him to be walking to go stay with a friend in New York City just wasn't going to happen.
No, I mean, honestly, and as a criminal defense attorney, I there's plenty of ways to argue things and there's plenty of ways to win cases, and you have to chip away at things as the case goes. But this particular topic, I feel like there was a 0% chance. There's no chance she's letting him out under these circumstances. Most times people who are accused of this kind of horrific act are remanded. But then when you add in the fact that he has no ties to New York, let alone the United States, and so many ties elsewhere, and all of his funds are, in another country or other countries, staying with a friend in New York, that ain't going to cut it. There's no way that judge was going to let him go.
What do you tell your client going in to those types of hearings where if maybe he really had his hopes up that today he had a nice suit on, that he was going to be walking out of there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You have to manage a client's expectations. People who are arrested, especially if they don't have a record, like he doesn't have a record, he's never been through this before, they really don't know what to expect. And so you really have to manage their expectations and you say, listen, today is not going to go as you really want it to go. We have to focus on big picture. We have to focus on your defense. We have to focus on getting you prepared for future court dates. Today is not going to be the day we win this case. And these kinds of cases are never won on day one. They require a lot of effort and a lot of strategy over time.
And the other part of it, and it always stands out to me, is, this is a guy he doesn't have a record, so he's never been through this before. He seemed in some way to love his daughter. I mean, clearly he's accused of killing her, but just the social media, they were close, it appeared. And yet he's stoic in court. And there's just no emotion on his face. What do you make of that type of body language when we see a defendant like this one in the situation he's in?
I've seen it run the gamut. I've seen people show a ton of remorse at these hearings. I've seen people stone face and I've seen people flippant. The one thing you don't want to be is flippant. You don't want to be, arrogant and seem like you don't care. Here, the fact that he doesn't show a lot of emotion, it could mean a lot of different things. It could mean that he's still kind of in shock over what happened. It could mean that he's scared. It could mean that he doesn't want to show any sort of emotion. He doesn't want to crack. It sounds like he's not from here, so he might have like a cultural difference, frankly. So, you try not to read into body language. It's very difficult not to, though. It's true. He did seem very stoic, as you said.
How do you coach a client for that so they don't have that emotional breakdown, which could impact their case?
It's hard to control emotions sometimes, and in other circumstances, you want people to show a little bit of how they're feeling, whether it's remorseful or otherwise. But you basically want to explain to the person the most important thing is to be respectful. This is a court of law. They're accusing you of breaking very serious laws. The last thing you want is to show up in court and prove them right. You don't want to show that you don't have respect for the judge. You want to answer politely. You want to look like you're paying attention. Whether you're stoic or not is not as important as showing that you actually take this seriously.
How do you see, knowing how the court system works in New York, he's next due in court, I think it's August 19th. Where does this case go from here as far as the system and how it'll handle it?
So what will happen next is the prosecutor has to turn over all of their discovery to the defense, meaning all of the evidence that they're relying upon to prove his guilt, they have to show to the defense and turn that over physically. As more evidence comes in, they're going to turn more over because they may not have everything right out the gate. There may be some notes, for example, laboratory notes that they don't have possession of yet. But for now, whatever's in their possession must go to the defense. The defense attorney is going to review it and obviously speak with the client about it extensively. Once that happens, essentially you have to build that case up to be ready for trial. There will be pre-trial hearings to see if any of the recovered evidence or statements or identifications or anything else need to be suppressed. And then once all of those legalities are cleared out, now you can start talking about going to trial if there's no plea.
He is charged with second-degree murder, and in some states, second-degree murder is a spur-of-the-moment type of crime, and first-degree murder is more, I planned it out and it was methodical. And when you look at this, and if you see it as that way, it would be a first-degree murder case because it appears that this was a plan, just from what we know allegedly right now. How does it work in New York, and why is this a second-degree murder case?
That's a great question. Yeah, in New York, it's different. In New York, intent to kill, all of the planning, premeditation, all of those words that you normally hear associated with murder in the first degree, that's actually a murder in the second degree here in New York. Now, that doesn't mean it's taken lightly. The proposed sentence there is 25 to life on a murder in the second degree. So it's very, very serious. The difference between murder in the second in New York and murder in the first is that there has to be an aggravating factor above and beyond the premeditation to bump it up to murder in the first. The best way that I could give an example of that is, for example, if you kill a cop, kill a judge, kill anybody in law enforcement, that makes it from a murder 2 to a murder 1. And there are various other bump ups, but that's probably the easiest one to understand and appreciate.
And then the fact that he is no ties to the United States and has these passports to multiple countries, would that factor at all into how this plays out?
Yeah, so it would definitely have factored into the bail situation, right? Like even if a judge were to consider releasing him or putting bail on this case, even $1 million bail where he might make it, I am sure a judge would also say as a condition he would have to surrender his passports. So, he's remanded now, so there's really no concern there that he's going to flee. But had there been any bail set, I would have expected a judge also to demand that he give up his passports as well.
All right, Serena Townsen, what a sad story out of upstate New York, but we really appreciate your perspective on this. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.